Welcome to the Greenpill.network podcast. If you're just joining us, we are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers focused on using crypto to bring positive-sum digital systems to the world. This podcast features the people who are doing it, and we publish a season of 5 to 10 episodes every couple months. This season is all about impact. How can we manifest the meme of impact equals profit? What are the most interesting experiments and ideas in impact tracking? How can we build crypto economic experiments that elevate impactful builders? And how do we move from virtue signaling to crypto economic proof of virtue? These are the themes of Greenpill Impact Season 2024. One special thing that we're doing this season is allowing you to collect this episode. You can go to pods.media/greenpill to collect this episode and other episodes in the Greenpill Impact season. Today, we are talking to Sejal Bitbeckers and Bitbeckers about Greenpill Hypercerts experiments. So Sejal is the community lead at Greenpill.network and is now working on Gitcoin Grant Stack. Bitbeckers is a developer with Raid Guild, who was the lead developer on this experiment. This was an experiment in tying the primitive of hypercerts, which you can kind of think of as impact tracking NFTs. Think of them as kind of carbon credits, but for any impact vector. Connecting that to Gitcoin's new Grant Stack product, which is a tool that allows anyone to run a Gitcoin grants round. So what are the ways in which we can orient crowdfunding platforms like Gitcoin Grants to where the impact is actually happening? How do we take hypercerts, which track impact, and Gitcoin Grants, which are for crowdfunding, and how do we combine them to make a more impactful crowdfunding experience? So we talked a little bit about the experiment that was run during Gitcoin Grants round 19 with $5,000 matching pool allocated to Gitcoin Grants that had hypercerts experiments associated with them on this episode. So if you're just starting out with Gitcoin Grant Stack or hypercerts, maybe worth checking out the individual episodes on those primitives. This is a sort of a combo move episode in which we're combining a couple different concepts. We're combining Greenpill.network, Gitcoin Grant Stack, and hypercerts in this episode to try to create more impact. It's impact season. And so more funding to the things that are impactful is the theme here. And this was kind of a really fun episode that was like a medley of different voices. Bitbeckers brings the developer perspective. Sejal brings the community perspective and also the Gitcoin Grants perspective. Carl, my co-host for the episode, also brings the hypercerts and OS Observer impact tracking perspective. So this was a really fun episode for me to talk about how we might approach the meme of impact equals profit. And I think it's straight down the middle for Greenpill Impact Season to be talking about combining all these primitives together. So without further ado, I give you Sejal Bitbeckers and Carl talking about impact with hypercerts, Gitcoin Grant Stack, and Greenpill.network. Enjoy. You want to start off by doing a quick intro? Sejal, maybe you start, and then Bitbeckers will pass it to you.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, I'm Sejal. I started my journey in Web3 almost 2 years back, so I'm very new as compared to anyone here. I started working with DAOLens, which was a DAO tooling company, and that is where I actually got into DAOs and started discovering about tooling and everything. That is where I actually discovered Gitcoin and Owocki. So I was so inspired by all the work that Gitcoin was doing at that point in time, and especially Greenpill, like it was a podcast by then. I started listening to the podcast, and that is where I wanted to sort of see how is that, is there something that can be done where we can disseminate all of this information in a way which can be utilized in a local way. Like I was new to this and so many people were new to this, right? How is that we can reach people in a way which is easily understood? That's how I eventually bumped into Kevin at Eat Denver and sort of like pitched an idea. How about we create a community around this, right? That is how I started working with Greenpill Network. And then everything was going great. And recently, because there's a lot of alignment between what Greenpill Network is doing and what Gitcoin is, also trying to achieve. I believe, we can be a local arm of Gitcoin. This is how I have now recently started contributing to Gitcoin as well. Yeah, so that was my, I don't know how long, but yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thank you, Sejal. Sejal was kind of the driving force between But Greenpill V1, which was just kind of the book and the podcast, and Greenpill V2, which is Greenpill.network, all these local chapters and actually having a Discord community. So if you're listening out there and you're looking to get more involved locally with Regen Crypto, you can go to Greenpill.network and join a local chapter. And it's all Sejal's work right there, which has been great. Bitbeckers, I'll pass it on to you next.
Yeah, thanks. Also maybe starting with how I got into Web3. I was working at a bank in the payment system, and in the meantime, there was a whole ICO boom. I thought, wait, why are people still hyped about this whole blockchain shit? So I started looking more into this, and I thought, wait, I'm building payment systems, and they already have this. And actually, Gitcoin was the reason that I got into it. So I applied for the Gitcoin kernel block at the Genesis block. And there I met Spencer Graham. We worked on a commitment staking protocol. I rolled into Raid Guild. I went to East Denver, which was like the craziest conference that I've ever experienced. And then at Shelling Point Amsterdam, there was an RFP for impact measurement, the quantification and dashboards. And I was just on the public good train. So with Raid Guild, we started working on that. And with Supermodular and Protocol Labs, that kind of rolled into Hypercerts. And then from Hypercerts, I got in touch with a lot of communities. And I'm trying to help them use Hypercerts and make Hypercerts a key component in the impact funding flows.
Great. Thanks, Bitbeckers. So we're stitching a few threads here together. The Greenpill network is the first thread. Hypercerts is another thread. And then Gitcoin Grant Stack is the third thread. And I think in order to stitch them together, maybe first we need a refresher on what Hypercerts is. Carl, I guess you're co-hosting with me, but maybe you want to take that. Remind the audience what Hypercerts are and why they're powerful.
Yeah, so Hypercerts are a new primitive for measuring impact, tracking impact claims. So basically any Hypercert, it says who did what over what period of time, and then it gives the owner of that Hypercert claims to future impact that might result from that work. And so it's a really generalizable primitive that can support all sorts of different use cases. Another way of like reducing it a little bit is to say it's like a carbon credit for any impact vector. If you can basically describe the work, then anybody who owns that Hypercert, they can lay claim to the impact that results from it.
Yep. So we've got a couple pieces on the table. Hypercerts, which are impact tracking NFTs. Gitcoin Grant Stack, which is a tool that allows any community to run a Gitcoin grants round. And then we've got Greenpill.network, which has on the order of a dozen local chapters. Sejal, keep me honest. I'm not sure what the latest number is. And so we put together this experiment in Gitcoin Grants 19, in which basically we forked Gitcoin Grant Stack and we added support for Hypercerts onto it. And the idea was that the Greenpill Network chapters could mint Hypercerts for impactful things that they had done, and we could display those straight away on the Gitcoin grant. And it was kind of an experiment in seeing, can we route crowdfund contributions to the projects that have more Hypercerts as opposed to just which ones have the prettier logos or are the most popular ones. So that was the experiment that we ran during GG19. I think Carl, maybe you're representing Hypercerts here. Bitbeckers is the developer on the project, and Sejal and I are representing Gitcoin and Greenpill. So that was the experiment that we ran in GG19. And anyone want to riff on top of that in that experiment?
Yeah, if you wanna, if we can talk a little bit about the tech, because I always find that, of course, one of the most interesting aspects. So one of the big promises of Web3 and decentralization is the composability of permissionless protocols. Right? We can all build really cool tools and we can let them play together, and that's awesome because we don't need permission to do so. What's really interesting is when you start combining these protocols, you usually find out how open are they, because maybe they made one really cool use case, but it doesn't work for the other one, or you can't really let them play together nicely. What we found with Hypercerts and other protocol is that, like on the contract level or on the tech stack level, the integration was relatively easy, because Hypercerts is basically a token that's on chain that has an ID, and we have the metadata in the grant stack, which is only on IPFS. So we just add the ID to the metadata, and the two things are connected. So when you have an application that uses the grant stack, or that is the grant stack, you can pull the information into there. what you then see next is that a lot of the challenges that we have in Web3, of course, is like usability, UX, make it intuitive, make people understand what they're doing. And I think that's also where we found that we have some room to improve. But for the composability, like just connecting the two, that was remarkably easy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about Web3 is the modularity of each of these pieces. It makes it easier to combine them into a system that works all together. And it's been a hard fought thing for Gitcoin because we re-architected the entire platform to be modular and decentralized a year or so ago. And this wouldn't have been possible with the old centralized version of Gitcoin, what we used to call C grants. So yeah, taking all the technology off the shelf and stitching them together, I think is one of the powerful things about Web3.
I think one of the things which is interesting, but also a challenge here, is that whenever you're given a protocol, by nature it's flexible. There's almost an unlimited set of use cases that it can support. And you definitely have that problem with hypercerts. It's like, where do you actually start? How do you start using these things? How do you start getting communities to recognize them? How do you start buyers to actually purchase them and value them? There's like a multi-dimensional cold start problem, just getting that additional usage to happen. And I think that one of the things that's been just kind of a leap of faith that many people have taken is that if you just start creating these things and start using them and start representing more and more forms of impact in the form of a hypercert, then they actually will start to accrue value in that way. And so every time we do an experiment, it can be, at this early stage, it can be a little bit difficult to say, okay, here's the immediate impact that this had because all these hypercerts were sold, or all of a sudden they changed hands or they unlocked this new use case. On the other hand, if everybody just started using hypercerts to track their work and people started buying hypercerts as a way of funding that work, then immediately you'd have this marketplace take shape. So I think we're still very much at like the bootstrapping stage. And I'm curious to hear a bit more about some of the friction that you encountered, Sejal, in getting people to use hypercerts and interact with them for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, before getting into, the challenges, I definitely want to say, thanks to you guys for actually doing this experiment, because I got to discover so much work that chapters were doing, which I didn't know. Like, we always remember the popular chapters, like who post pictures, who have, who talk about it, but there are a lot of chapters, they were actually doing a lot of work which we didn't know, right? So it definitely helped us to sort of know, okay, the chapters are doing this work, right? So thanks to you for that. So talking about the challenges, definitely the first thing is, what is a hypercert? Like, how do you explain it to them, right? Like, what is it? And if you have explained it, then the next question is, why are we doing this, right? So that is another thing that we have, we sort of had to explain it to them. Like, we simply said that this is essentially you putting your proof, right, the work that you've done, and yeah, that's it, like in very, very simple terms, like very simple, right? And why you have to do it is something I feel like they did not really get it, like they did not really understand why they are doing it. Like, we had to put it as a requirement in the application. Like, when we run around, right, we have to determine the eligibility criteria, and we had to like put in there, like, you have to have your hypercert minted. So a lot of people did it as a step, because if they didn't do it, their application will not get in, right? So I think that that was a challenge where people don't really understand its value, like why they are doing, right? So that is definitely the second challenge. The other thing was that it overlapped with GG19, right? So that is something that I believe, because a lot of the chapters were also applying for grant from GG19. So they sort of like were either got confused, they ended up applying in the main Gitcoin page, right, rather than the forked version, right? So that was a confusing part, and the whole noise around, because GG19 is so loud and everybody's so consumed by it, it just was difficult to get people together, right? The other thing was definitely because it was on a forked version. I believe like Bitbeckers can talk more about the tech challenges that we had, but there were some glitches that we had, right? So it was a lot of like on and off, right? So like while minting, okay, we reached the third step, but we can't do the fourth step because of, maybe there's a bug or there is something, or it's not getting displayed, right? And know that these are the people who are not essentially Web3 native people, right? Like, a lot of back and forth with them means losing them, right? Like you lost their attention, because it's hard to get them. Like first you have to just like go through like why of it, and then when you are actually doing the how of it, you actually lost them because you couldn't really complete the how of it, right? So I believe like those are broadly the challenges like we faced while educating the community and actually getting them to mint it. And one of the most important things I believe, like I'm talking about it at the last, but it's actually like a bigger challenge, is essentially doing some sort of quality control, right? Like we didn't do it. There was no metrics, like we did not define very clear metrics around what will this hypercert entail, like for what you need to mint, right? We made it pretty open. And I'll tell you the reason why we did it, right? There was a reason of not defining it very clearly, because the idea was to get people become comfortable minting it, rather than getting into mint about the meetups or mint about this, right? Just if they can just mint it, understand it, and mint it, that will be a win for us, because from the next round, maybe like after this, we can start getting into categories, right? So but unfortunately, because it was not defined, it's confusing. Like you look at it, it's everything that a chapter has done till now that they have talked about. So I think defining those metrics or categories is extremely important, which we sort of like missed. So yeah, I don't know how much clear this is, but these are broadly, I can think of the pain points that we went through or challenges we went through while getting them to mint. Like I can later talk about how many chapters I actually ended up minting and what all information they gave, and did it have any impact. But yeah, those were the challenges.
Yeah, hearing you describe that, Sejal, it kind of reminds me of a friend's blog post called "Your DApp Has Too Many Steps," and it basically, it's really about kind of meeting users where they're at and recognizing that for most users, they might not be entering your DApp already having bridged to an L2 and already having had a lot of experience minting NFTs and doing things like that. And many times it really starts with the process of actually, moving funds into a centralized exchange, and then actually taking them off and installing MetaMask for the first time and writing down your private key, and all of those steps just to get to the end, and then you're minting a hypercert, and then what's actually happening after that. So it can be pretty anticlimactic, especially for people who are not native and used to these types of experiences. So I think like as an industry, we need to do much better, and especially if we're trying to encourage people to have one of their first experiences be creating a hypercert or selling a hypercert, then we need to do better.
Totally. Yeah. Like always, I believe like education is such a big component, right? Apart from making it intuitive, apart from making it, pretty straightforward, I believe like education is so important. Be it anything, I think anything needs run books and guides. Like this is something that I've felt so strongly. We did not have it. Like every time we used to hop on calls, and every time like it was a lot of back and forth, as opposed to like if we actually created, let's say, like a guide, like this is how you mint it, that would have been maybe easier, right? So also I don't like completely blame this part, because I believe like it was so much like on the go, right? We were building it and we were doing it, right? It was not like it's built and then you do it, right? So but I believe like education is extremely important, and having like proper documentation of how to is something that it seems like this is very common, but yeah, it's extremely important.
Yeah, I agree there, and I think like Carl also said, this is a general issue in Web3 and the Web3 UX. But even in the Web3 UX, the big unlock would actually be if hypercert is just there, and we don't need to talk about needing to use hypercerts or a specific rounds app or all the steps that you need to do. Because even like for me as a developer, I mean, let's say I'm a professional, I still sometimes get lost in all the buttons. But the steps that we've made from the moment that I entered the Genesis blog on Gitcoin and what we are building right now are humongous. It's insane the progress that we've made, but we know we have more to do.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I was the one who orchestrated all of these pieces coming together, and so it's fun to do this retrospective podcast with you all. But maybe I'll state the vision of what I was sort of going for with it, and we can work backwards from the vision and forwards from what we learned in this experiment. But basically, There's a bunch of crowdfunding platforms out there right now. We're all familiar with them: Gitcoin, Giveth, Clearfund. There's other ones. And right now, one of the powerful things that they do is they route contributions from everyday people to their favorite projects, and they decentralize the capital allocation questions of what we want to fund in these ecosystems to everyday people, which I think is really powerful. But one of the other things that they do is they sort of move away from experts making technocratic decisions to democratic decisions. But in the process, they move away from people who deeply know the subject matter of what they're funding to everyday people whose information fire hose might be browsing Twitter. And this is a very small component of what they look like, of what they look at. And so you get this Keynesian beauty contest problem where people don't just fund the projects that are the best, they fund the projects that are the most popular or that they're fans of. And so what I really wanted to do was use hypercerts to orient the democratic decision making more on which projects have had impact. And there's a lot of places where this fell over. We talked about how the app was forked away from the main Gitcoin experience. We talked about how complicated it was. We talked about how people didn't even know what hypercerts were. And I think those are all surmountable challenges. And I think that the end state that I'd love to get to is that in the future, Gitcoin grants could all have hypercerts or EAS attestations of their impact. And you'll just be able to go to Gitcoin grants, and instead of sorting by the most popular projects or sorting alphabetical, you could sort by the most verified impact, the highest impact score, the ones that have a web of trust that are talking about their impact, and you can fund those projects. And there's a lot of draw the rest of the owl in here. There's a lot of things to do in between what we did in GG19 and in that vision. But I just wanted to articulate what I think the North Star is for impact tracking tools like hypercerts being combined with crowdfunding platforms like Gitcoin grants. And it's sort of provocative, but I think that in the next couple of years, we could probably get there. So I'm really here for it. I'm curious if anyone has any comments on this, or if wants to riff on that. I don't have a question, but I'm just put that back to the group and see what people think about working backwards from that vision and forwards from what we did in GG19.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give it a go at the start. I mean, we have a lot of talks about this, and also within the Hypercerts Foundation. If you want to start thinking about, there is a funder somewhere in the world that says, oh, I have bags. I like climate, I like tech, I like certain goals, I like social impact, I want to fund this. I think hypercerts is a key component in there, because this is the declaration of who they will want, right? It's the claim, but it can also be a signal of intent. It can also be a plan. And depending on where you are in your funding flow or your growth, you can move over this axis. The problem is that you still then only have this claim, and without a claim, it's not certified, right? It's not a hypercert, it's just a hyperclaim maybe even. So what we want to do is connect these two things together. We want to know what is the claim and what has actually happened, or how will you prove this, so that the moment that you say, oh, I did this, so that we can prove this. I think this is basically like a segue into the issue that we really want to solve in the next year and in the years after that, which are impact attestations. We want to know if somebody says, this is what I'll do, this is what I did. We want to know, how can we verify this? We talked about this within the foundation and said, like, okay, how can we really solve this? And this is a problem that we cannot solve on our own. We cannot build a cathedral that says, this is how you need to do impact attestations. What we can do is facilitate the bazaar that says, well, this is one thing that's really cool for the Greenpill network. And this is really cool if you're really popular on Forecaster. And this is really cool if you do something with climate. And all of these different strategies, and like you said with EAS, we could compose them, we can facilitate them, and we can support them, so that you can get to a point, for instance, and maybe Carl has a nice thing about this with Open Source Observer, where you can actually start identifying, well, which has been like the most impactful projects, but also that you can start seeing these signals, which are the most promising projects. Because if you have people that have reached high impact in the past, there's a higher likelihood that they'll also create high impact in the future. So when they align themselves with projects, we can start aiming at those, or those prospective funders can aim at those projects. So bringing these claims with the evaluations and together, you can start thinking about the funding mechanics, but also about the reputation that you earn with verified impact that you achieve. And I think these all need to play together very nicely. This is why we want to have composable protocols to get there.
Yeah, let me just jump in as well and say that I think that being able to verify impact is the big unlock that will give Hypercerts value and that will give any kind of impact market an engine behind it. I'm going to take off my Hypercerts Foundation hat. I actually left the core Hypercerts team around August, and I'm now working on Open Source Observer, although I do still sit on the Hypercerts Foundation in a voluntary capacity. And actually put on a different hat, which is as a member of a Greenpill chapter and as hopefully someone who would be in the market for buying Greenpill Hypercerts. So I'll wear those two hats now, not a person actually building Hypercerts. As a Greenpill chapter member, I would actually, whenever there's a Gitcoin round, whenever there's some kind of event, I would like to be able to show my support and make sure that the Greenpill NYC chapter is able to get more funding, is able to use that funding towards having better events, bringing on new people, growing the community, doing things that are meaningful here in New York City. I haven't been to any other Greenpill chapters. I haven't been to the one in Boulder. I haven't been to the one in Berlin. I haven't been to the one in Taipei. I've only been to the one in New York. So I don't feel qualified to assess the impact of any of the other ones. On the other hand, I do feel that going back and looking at all of the impact attestations and other proof of impact that these chapters have at the end of the year and could be expressed with their Hypercerts, I would love to be in a position where I could be a whale going in and buying those up and giving a signal of what I want the community to do overall. And so I think that there's a couple different roles people can play here, signaling impact, and then at the same time, creating a market demand for the most important types of impact that can happen across the network.
I love it. And I'm so glad. Sorry, Kevin. I was just I'm so glad that Carl is in GP New York. It's really
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that one way to frame the experiment is that we talked in another impact season episode about these impact markets being triple-sided marketplaces where you've got the people who are doing the impact minting Hypercerts, you've got the people who are purchasing the Hypercerts or funding them, and then you've got the impact evaluators in between that are sort of saying this is a legit Hypercerts, whereas this is more of a hyperclaim. And one way to think about the Gitcoin grants experiment, I think, is bootstrapping the demand for Hypercerts. So bootstrapping that funder side of the market. And let's just call it, it kind of didn't really work in GG19, but we made a stab at it and we learned a lot from doing it. I think if I was able to do it, if I was going to do it all over again, I would have added a step for impact evaluators to go in and say, oh, this is actually a verified claim, and I attest that this one is a legit one. Taking the hyper claims to be Hypercerts could be something that we could do better if we were going to do it again next time. But just wanted to put that framing on the table, as this is bootstrapping one side of the market, which is the funding of Hypercerts. And whenever I pitch Hypercerts to people, one of the big objections that they have is, well, who's going to buy them? Where's the demand going to come from? And I think in a way we sort of proved out that by connecting them to Gitcoin grants, there's already latent demand for impact coming through Gitcoin grants, and we can bootstrap that side of the market.
And there have been successful examples of people buying Hypercerts, right? We've done this for Suzalu. Basically, everybody that mints them expects that they can buy them. I'm talking with projects like VoiceDeck, which I'm personally, I just really like the project. They want to use Hypercerts as a fundraising mechanic. The issue, if you want to say, well, it didn't really work, I think there's also a timing issue, because at this moment we're wrapping up the audit of the marketplace, which enables these funding and these sales mechanics. And then we can start supporting all these projects, integrating not only Hypercerts, but also the claims. And there are multiple conversations that we're having. So not only with Open Source Observer, that's just really close to Hypercerts, but also, for instance, Deracy, which is also an impact evaluation marketplace. So we do see all these components coming together, and I'm really excited for the next few months, how they will play together.
Yeah, I just want to say that we are working with John's project, which is Deracy, for essentially reviewing the Hypercerts that have been minted by the chapter. So two people from GPN, Lana and Easy, who I just want to give a shout out to, have been instrumental in, carrying out this whole experiment with me, basically working together with the community members and onboarding them. So they are reviewing the hypercerts. So I'm excited to see how that goes. The other thing that I want to just quickly mention is that I'm interested to see how this goes when we actually do it in one of the Gitcoin grants round, right? Like the hypercerts integration with Grant Stack, because we are not sure if donors are essentially looking at the hypercerts, right? So we couldn't really know, because what happened was like chapters, they have their community members, and the community members will support their own chapter. So we don't really know if they are even looking at the hypercerts, if they are even looking at the work that has been done, right? Is it because they are not interested, or is it because they don't know how to really look at it and how to really make sense of it, right? Because as much as it sounds or looks easy, that it's pretty straightforward. You just go and look, and what is the work done, does it align with your values, and then you decide. But I think there is a part, like there is this angle to it where people don't really know on how to navigate through this, right? So that is where I think people who build tech really needs to step into and be like, how do we make it intuitive, right? This was actually one of the ideas that was suggested by one of the community members. Is it like, can we do something like where people, the projects which have more hypercerts, the number of hypercerts are more, their project looks greener? Like, can there be like a color variation sort of a thing where people can actually just look at it and be like, okay. So I mean, this is just like an idea, but we still not sure if donors are actually be able to make sense of it, or are they even interested to actually see that, right? Or they just want to go with the one they've already decided, or based on what others are supporting, I want to decide what I'm going to do, right? So those are the things I feel, the questions which might get answered when we actually do it with on a bigger scale.
Yeah, one of the things which is, I guess, an interesting thought experiment is how some of these different funding mechanisms might layer on top of each other. And so hearing each of you describe your experience of how you got into Web3, there was like an event or some kind of education that was really pivotal in opening your eyes and getting you excited about it. And hopefully for many people, that will be a Greenpill chapter or something like it. You could imagine a world where when you join, when you go to your first thing, you get a hypercert. And then at some point in time, let's say that you've made it, you've come out the other side, right? You're in a position where you can actually be funding those events and paying for them to continue, and ideally bring in the next 3 or 4 people to do that. So one mechanism could just be, purchasing the hypercerts from the event, and then that going back into a general pool, which can be used towards those types of operating expenses. Another version could actually be buying the hypercerts of the people who are attending their first event, and then as those people go, and a year later, some of them actually find themselves on the other side, now having, working full time in crypto, doing things here. They might be in a position to do the same thing again. And so by creating a mechanism like that, not only would you be paying it forward and saying, this is a really impactful event, I want to sponsor the next person to go, as you were able to look and zoom out and see which events had the most people that then went on to pay it forward, you'd be getting very good signal on what were the most impactful events. And so, again, all of the tools are here. We just have to start kind of, using these things and making it the thing that people do when they go to events like these.
Is this something that you would, if I can ask a question, is it something you would do now in the Greenpill network New York? Would you introduce this right now? Do you feel what would be needed to do so?
I think all these things really just start with the person who has that idea and is going to handhold people through all of the uncomfortable first, like onboarding and user journeying that you just go through and creating these types of experiences. Unfortunately, there's a lot of messy work that has to happen between eating out some kind of an idea and actually turning into something which becomes a movement. But again, I think we have the tools. We just need to start experimenting and building.
Yeah.
So maybe Luciano, if you're listening, you can take that one up.
Well, we're getting towards the bottom of the hour, so I think I'll probably move us towards wrap-up questions in a sec here. But I'm curious, Sejal Bitbeckers, if there's anything that I didn't ask that you want to say about this experiment, or where Greenpill Network or Hypercerts or Gitcoin is going. How can we? Is there anything else that comes up when you think about approaching this meme of impact equals profit and grounding more of this crowdfunding into impact data? Anything I didn't ask that you want to say? Sejal, we'll maybe go to you first.
Yeah. I think about the experiment, we've pretty much covered everything. I just want to say, like, I think I also see Greenpill Network as a playground for a lot of experiments, right? As much as people are not exactly like a lot of, like, there are not a lot of people who are Web3 natives, but at the same time, they're very open for experimentation, right? So I think that, doing an experiment with Greenpill Network, anybody who is listening to this, and if they're interested in doing an experiment, we are very open to sort of see, what works, what doesn't work. I think it was such a great learning experience. And as much as it was tough to onboard chapters, I just want to say that, like, if few chapters figure it out, they will make sure like the rest of the network gets it, right? So it definitely has that effect. So yeah, I'm just glad that we did it and we had a huge learning. And I'm sure like more organizations or ecosystems will be interested to sort of do this. Yeah.
Bitbecker, same question to you. Anything I didn't ask you want to say?
The only thing that I think is really important that we start doing is the UX. We already covered this. What I think will be the cool part is that, like, we're obviously in our network, we're in our bubble, we all know each other, we see each other wherever we go, which is awesome. But I think what we a major unlock is if we get to the point where we actually bring the Web3 to the people. So if you look, like, an easy example will be open source code, right? If we have the tools which we're building to evaluate open source contributions, not everybody that works open source does Web3, but almost everybody uses GitHub. If you just go to GitHub and there would be a banner that, hey, GG25, you got 100 ETH because you built Node or Bun or whatever will be the next cool tool. And you go like, oh, but wait, how did I get this? And then you lure them into the rabbit hole instead of trying to guide every rabbit into the hole and see what happens when they need to start getting their funds out.
Yeah. And before that, I just want to say that I am amazed to see the patience that TradeKill team has, like a lot of patience, because it was so much back and forth with the community members. Everything they questioned, they were like, why is this way? Why is this way? Right. And yeah, the way they patiently listened to it and actually, changed a lot of things because we were not comfortable and, we couldn't really understand it. So I am so glad that such a technical team working with such non-technical people, it was such a great, it is a great combination. So yeah, shout out to you guys.
Thank you. That was also great fun. It's great to see how the Greenpill Network people are so committed to making the degens regens and how they all have a very strong opinion. We of course had our constraints in time and aiming for the grant round, but it was, like you also said, like Izzy and Lana and I think Super Synapse. I mean, they all provided like high quality input, just like, hey, why doesn't this button do this? And it was really impactful. Thank you.
Carl, anything top of mind for you as we wrap up?
I just want to say that I think the Greenpill network is a really impressive movement. I think that it's going to do amazing things in this year, 2024. And I really want to encourage each chapter to come up with its own identity and its unique sense of community and purpose, because I hope that most people who get exposed to Greenpill, they come with a motivation to find what matters to them, and they find that they're able to express that through their chapter. And so as a card-carrying Greenpill NYC chapter, I think we're in the process of discovering that and really excited about what the year has. And I look forward to meeting people from many other chapters in the year ahead.
Yeah, and maybe I'll close out by just a call to action for the listener. It's 2024. It's a new year. If you're looking to get involved locally and play with regen crypto, check out Greenpill.network, join the Discord, join a local chapter today. And it's really a fun opportunity to get involved in Web3 in a way that's cosmolocal. So taking the best practices from the global open source software, great experiments like Gitcoin, GrandStack, and Hypercerts, and apply them locally where you have context about what impact that you need. And Greenpill.network it's been really cool to see it grow. It's been almost like an accident for me of like a side project from Gitcoin. But to see people rallying around the meme and to have it happening has been a lot of fun. So check out Greenpill.network is the call to action for the listener. And I think that one of the things in my vision as we move forward is how could we allocate capital to these local chapters such that they can allocate capital locally according to what has impact for them locally? So I'm almost imagining like a spider web where each of the Greenpill chapters raises money from the main Gitcoin pool, and then they can deploy that capital locally. And the dream is to have thousands of people join the ecosystem, and their first experience with crypto is receiving money for having impact, as opposed to buying an NFT or buying a bag. So that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with Greenpill Network, or at least I am. And it's a nice place to do rapid experimentation about playing with new concepts for Gitcoin in the future. So I don't know if anyone has any reactions to that. If not, we can wrap.
Yeah, I just want to add something. So it has already started happening. I just want to give this example of Greenpill Taiwan, right? So they go by name Greenpill Sofa. I'm not sure why they've kept that name, but they go by Greenpill Sofa. That is essentially Greenpill Taiwan. They actually raised funds during GG19, and it was not a lot of funds, but it was around $1,500. And they did their own QF round, like a local QF round, which was where they onboarded NGOs and they distributed the funds, which is insane. I would love to share. I can share the link of they've written a essay about it, how it went, and we can put it in the show notes maybe if people are interested in knowing how that went. It was a very small round, but I'm so glad that happened. Like, it's already happening. So I'm really excited to see how this goes, like people actually raising funds and then utilizing it to distributing it locally and onboarding, NGOs and local communities. So that's incredible.
Yeah, and over time, I hope to see cross-pollination of best practices from local chapters. So that experiment that you just talked about in Taiwan, there's no reason that another chapter in South Africa or in Denver couldn't replicate that. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for cross-pollination and pushing forward experimentation of best practices across the chapters. So that's one thing that I'll be looking for in 2024. The learning velocity will be so high if we're all learning and building in public together, because we can transport lessons of what works in one place to other places. And so maximizing our learning velocity is, I know that's something that Jonas from Optimism has been really pushing, and I've been pushing the Greenpill networks and Gitcoin to be learning more in public, because that'll increase the learning velocity, and over the course of time we'll just accelerate this movement forward. Any other comments before we wrap? All right. 4-person episodes are always a little tricky because you're like looking at each other like who's going to comment next. But I really enjoyed this discussion. Feels like it was very emergent. I feel like a lot of us are wearing many hats and have like a full vision of where this is going. So this was a fun episode for me, and hopefully the listeners enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much for joining me, y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Peace and love. Alrighty, we just heard from Sejal and Bitbeckers about the Greenpill Hypercerts Gitcoin Grant Stack experiment. I am excited about this because I think that it was a promising experiment in approaching the meme of impact equals profit and tracking impact, connecting that impact with more funding. Thanks again for listening to the Greenpill.network podcast. This podcast features the people who are building a coordination, a network society of thousands of hackers, dreamers, and doers focused on using crypto to bring positive sum digital systems to the world. I think Sejal, Carl, and Bitbeckers are examples of that. If you enjoyed this episode, you can collect it at pods.media/greenpill. And while you're at it, please make an offering to our algorithmic overlords. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps other people in the YouTube and iTunes and Spotify ecosystem find the Greenpill Network, find regenerative crypto, and helps us build this movement. Peace and love. See you next time.